Hi, everyone.
Hello, welcome to Roots and Wings Chronicles, log 9.
Yep.
We are getting there.
Yes, we are.
So today, as promised, we are going to talk more about boundaries. But we are going to dive into some of the stickiness of why boundaries are so gosh darn difficult.
Yes, exactly.
As we all know, if you had any sort of feeling on that initial reflection, this is the episode that will
Explain why.
explain why. Exactly.
Exactly. So
Let's
kind
dive
of
in.
like conversations where it takes some practice and you learn these skills and different styles. It doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes some practice, and it's the same.
And grace.
And grace. And it's the same with boundaries. Like, one of the reasons it's so difficult to set boundaries is because you don't really know where to start with them. You don't know what boundary even needs to be drawn,
Right.
how to communicate it. Like, all you know is you have some very strong emotions being triggered in you. You're either in, fight, flight, or freeze mode. And when you're in those modes,
You know something needs to change.
exactly, but you don't know where to start with it, and you don't even really know what boundary you need to draw. You just want it to end. And so really, where to start is taking some time to see where the feelings are coming from, the strong feelings are coming from, how you want them to be different, what could help make them different, and then, being able to communicate that to yourself before.
Yes.
Right?
Right? Because if we're not able to articulate, there we go, see, blah, blah, blah. If we're not able to articulate the boundary to ourselves, well, we're already hitting a roadblock.
Right. But that's one reason why it's so difficult, because you don't know where to start.
Right.
And
We tend to see, we want to fix the problem that's right in front of us instead of looking at the big picture of what the
Yes.
root of the issue in the relationship is. And so,
Exactly.
like Kelly was saying, take some time, reflect, which is, it's not always the most fun
Or comfortable thing to do.
or comfortable thing to do, but we need to reflect on where the issue is and what the proper boundary is to move us forward in the relationship.
And then Abigail talked about giving yourself some grace. And really, the second reason why boundaries are most likely so difficult is because no one ever modeled them for you. Right? In the day and age that we
Nobody
live in.
modeled them for me.
Yeah, we're talking. No, they didn't.
Speaking for ourselves here.
The world is changing, and we have generational, especially where women are concerned. It's we were taught to
Here's the rug.
keep the peace.
Sweep.
Right?
Sweep.
There you go. We were taught to keep the peace and to think about the feelings of the collective instead of the individual.
Yes.
And so that behavior just wasn't modeled.
And just like with anything else, right? Especially with what we talk about here. I mean, you've heard us talk about modeling and
Yes.
how important that is when it comes to self-talk, communication, and conversation with others. Same thing with boundaries. It is such a precarious, sticky subject. You don't know where to start on your own. If nobody's ever modeled it for you, I mean,
Right.
heck, what the heck?
All right. So what's the next reason?
So the next reason that boundaries can be so gosh darn difficult to place is because of our fear of isolation. So when we say that, what we're talking about is the sometimes inevitable separation that a boundary can place in a relationship. Overall, as we mentioned before, the goal of a boundary is really to bring people closer and to help us understand each other better and respect each other and just feel more connected.
Right. It fosters a deeper bond.
Right.
Right.
However, there is unfortunately always the potential that it'll do the opposite.
Especially if you're in our first scenario where you're kind of drawing boundaries that you haven't actually thought about, and you're not communicating them in a productive fashion because we haven't learned how to recognize, regulate, and communicate our feelings.
Exactly.
Right? So
in those cases, sometimes a boundary can come off as an ultimatum, which nobody really responds well to.
exactly. So fear of isolation, fear of not being accepted, a lot of the same fears that we feel that hold us back from following our dreams and hold us back from a lot of things, that's one reason why setting boundaries is so difficult.
But again, we have to remember when we're faced with that fear that at the end of the day, if the boundary is set compassionately, then it will bring you closer, and rather than tearing you apart.
Well, if both parties are receptive,
Yes.
right, to having boundaries set in the relationship. We're not going to say that it's always going to turn out the way that you want it to.
Yes. Going back to we cannot control everybody.
Exactly.
Right.
When you do communicate a boundary, compassionately and productively, or at least you feel that you are, it still could end up with an issue in the relationship. But if the other person cares about your feelings and wanting to foster a relationship that you're both comfortable in, or they're in that place in their own self journey, that they're able to kind of navigate those things, then it should make the relationship stronger.
Right.
Not
should.
Yes. In that instance, it's the correct use of the word should.
There we go. Okay. And we have to also remember that, no, ignore me. I already said that.
I do that all the time.
I already said it.
You did. I do it all the time.
I already said it. Okay. So moving on, kind of in line with this reason, another reason boundaries can be so difficult is because we're afraid of being shunned.
Shamed.
Shunned, criticized. So what do we mean when we talk about that? If you were a child who said, I feel, or I don't like X, Y, and Z, or I don't want to do this, or I can't do this, and the response was,
you shouldn't feel that way.
You shouldn't feel that way, or, that's disrespectful for you not to do this because I asked you to and I'm your elder.
I mean, just also in general in the world, right? I mean, when you try to set a boundary with somebody who doesn't want a boundary to be set, or
the word selfish gets thrown out.
Yes, the word selfish, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And you get shamed for thinking the way that you think because it's not normal, or it's selfish, or it's not being a team player. There should be no, people always say there's no I in team, but there is a place for I. There is a place for individuality, and that's what these boundaries are for.
Right.
And people that don't like that or aren't prepared to relinquish whatever the boundary is
the feeling of control that the lack of boundary gives them.
Exactly. Then they're gonna shame you, or they will shame you, or they have shamed you in the past, which is, again, one reason why they're so difficult.
Yes, but in that instance, again, remember grace. Grace is an important part of this whole process. And gosh darn light.
We just lost our light, but we're going to keep going with it.
Yeah. So remember grace, and I had one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, I promised Kelly I wouldn't bring politics into this.
Oh, but here we go.
No, I'm going to be very good.
Okay.
But just also, while we're talking about why we might be afraid of being shamed or criticized, as women, it's definitely a time to kind of consider our place in the world, traditionally and even right now, politically and socially, right? So as women, if you know, you know. If you know, you know. And I'll leave it at that. So, last piece of why this is so difficult, why boundaries are so goddamn hard.
And it kind of, is cumulative of all the other reasons why.
I think this is the pinnacle reason.
Yes, but because of all the other reasons, you don't know where to start, you don't know, shame, afraid of being shunned, all of those reasons, we come to this people-pleasing thing, which, again, when we talk about our place as women and how the behavior that's been modeled for us up until this point, right? People-pleasing is huge. As
women, as daughters, as mothers.
Right, people-pleasing is huge. And that's another reason why it's difficult to set boundaries, because people pleasers don't set boundaries, do they?
Well, they don't even know what it is. Yeah. I mean, I'll go back when I am a recovering people pleaser, and before I was in the recovery phase, boundaries were just a big no.
No, yeah, exactly.
Because they weren't even an option, right?
And
because it meant that I was putting myself in front of other people, and gosh, people pleasers don't do that.
And honestly, it wasn't even the shame or fear of what other people were going to say. It was what you would say to yourself about feeling like you needed a boundary.
Right, and a lot of that comes from a lot of the other things that we've talked about in the past. And it gets passed down through the generations, right? So similar to what I was saying previously, if you grew up in an environment where you felt safer by accommodating or walking on eggshells, or, you know, thinking of yourself was associated with guilt or disrespect or anything along those lines, people pleasing is a habit that you almost inevitably developed.
Yes.
And it coincides perfectly with a lack of boundary setting.
It does.
So.
And so, are they?
We said we weren't going to make this a 10-minute episode, but
here
you know,
boundaries and 5 different reasons. It just happens.
Just happens. So thanks so much for listening. We are almost done with our boundary discussion. In the next episode, we'll be wrapping it up.
Yes.
So if you have any questions, definitely send them along. We'd be happy to answer them in our last episode.
Yeah, please reply to the newsletter or send us a note at hello@themother-daughter-journey.com. We'd love to hear your feedback and incorporate.
Bye-bye. Thanks
Bye,
so much.
everybody.